Brian Pierce with the Pierce Brothers. Today we're going to talk about the Mauser 98, but more specifically about the Browning high power rifle based on the Mauser 98 action. And that's going to confuse a lot of people by calling it the Browning high power. The Browning high power pistol is of course the 9mm, and it's spelled HI power, high power. These are Browning high power HIGH, so that's the differentiate. Now before we get to those, let's talk about a little bit about the original Mauser 98. Here we have one, a military edition, of course 8x57 or 8mm Mauser as some call them. This one's of course made in the 1930s. I don't even know where you begin with such a classic as a 98 Mauser. Mauser themselves built more than 100 million rifles. Think about that a second, 100 million rifles. And you know, we boast with American sporting guns that hit a million mark or 2 million mark, and very few exceed that. But Mauser alone built 100 million rifles. That tells you something about its popularity. When you include all the other countries that have built the Mauser 98, we really don't know how many there are, but the number is staggering. It really is. It's an impressive number. But the Mauser 98, what a rugged, truly outstanding rifle. I mean, this thing, of course, patented back to 1895, but it's so proven in battle as being just a rugged, you know, get full of dirt, sand, abuse, neglect, and they just keep working. And we often hear a lot of comments about the claw extractor, and you look at that compared to a lot of modern extractors that actually work very well. But you look at this thing, and man, they're massive and strong. I've actually seen guns that were shot with severe overloads. You open the action and pound it out with a rubber mallet, pound them back, and it would literally rip the case head or the case rim off to extract it. It's that strong. A lot of other modern extractors are not even in the league of that. So for big game hunters, that's actually a very important thing. I don't want to dwell on this too long because I think that to do the Mauser 98 justice, we should do a separate video. So I want to fast forward to a more modern era with the Mauser 98. Oh, I was going to tell one story briefly before we go past the Mauser 98. An incredibly safe action, by the way. It has, of course, the twin forward locking lugs, as everybody's familiar with, 90-degree bolt lift, basically. It has a flange back here to protect on gases, but it's also heavily vented in the bolt body. It protects the shooters from gases coming back down the raceway. I'll tell you a brief story. Anybody that lives in the Emmett, Idaho area a long time, turning the clock back a long time ago, there was two friends that are now since deceased. Anybody that lives in the area will know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll just call them Roger and Tom. And they were associated with the Valley's only gun store for a long time. And they were out shooting one day, and Tom had a custom Mauser 98 and 270, beautifully stocked, finest of workmanship, all the wonderful stuff, and it was chambered in 270 Winchester. Roger, don't remember what kind of a 308 he was shooting. It was probably a Remington 700, but I'm not positive. But he was shooting. They were shooting both Remington ammo in green boxes, and they were pulling it out and shooting off the bench, sighting their guns in. And Tom pulled out a 308, stuck it in his control feed action Mauser, closed the bolt on it, and of course they held that case right back against the bolt face. So yeah, it's going to fire. Again, we're shooting a 308 and a 270, and any control round feed rifle will do this. So it's something to really be super aware of. He fires it, and the gun just kind of disassembled. I mean, it just fell to pieces, went every direction, and Tom came out literally unscathed. The rifle protected the shooter. Again, that's one of the virtues of the Mauser 98. Wonderful action. So we'll get into that more another day. But fast forwarding to 1947, Fabrique Nationale, or FN, out of Belgium, began importing to U.S. a Mauser 98 commercial rifle, which these guns were wonderfully made, very well machined. They were tighter tolerances than the military guns, so the play in the action was a lot less. Of course, the cutout was removed. But this particular gun had nice checkering, a little border pattern, a classic stock with a small cheek piece. I'm just showing this to my sons. It's like a rust type bluing on it, and just an absolute wonderful rifle. This one's in 30-06. These guns were the basis for many high-end custom guns. Some from reasonable engraving on the trigger and floor plate. They imported these from about 1947. I'm not sure when, early 50s at some point. They're not very common. You don't see them very often. But Browning, of course, their history goes clear back to about 1897 with FN, they could not pass up the opportunity to capitalize on the FN action as well, and so they basically brought in a gussied up version. That's not a very good one to show you, because that one is an old rifle of mine that has a lot of of use to it. But they brought in a higher gloss finish gun, of course, FN Mauser 98 commercial version. This one's in 375, by the way, 375 H&H, and they went with what's known as of course, a Claro walnut stock, but Monte Carlo style stock, a high comb with a rover cheek piece. Most of them had iron sights, and they were very well designed rifles. They were kind of designed to compete both with the Weatherby Mark V and the Winchester Model 70. It was kind of an interesting blend what Browning did with the import of the specs that they did on this. There was kind of one issue I must mention. There was a period where, in a rush to cure the wood on these guns, they used a salt bath method to cure the wood. Well, that came back to bite them, because those are known as saltwood guns, and you'll see where the recoil lugs and around anywhere that the action and the stock are together, the rust begins. And those guns, of course, take a real dive in value naturally. Kind of a sad chapter with a great rifle. But Browning began importing these late 59, early 60, and they were pretty much an instant success. And they offered them in a variety of calibers, from 222 clear up to 458. One thing I should mention, they did not make very many of them in a short action Mauser for short action cartridges, 243 and 308. They did make a few, but not very many. You don't see them very often. Most of them were on the Socko. You probably heard it called Seiko, but it's technically pronounced Socko action, a Finland-made gun, and this one being a 22-250 is an example. And this, I also might mention that. Well, anyway, that's mostly what you see the smaller calibers in, is the Socko action. And I'm not going to dive into this one too much today, because I think that's a topic would be best left for another day. Maybe we'll cover the Socko rifles in general during that golden era. Of course, they were super accurate. The Sockos, even the Brownings, were chromoly barrels that were very, very carefully worked on to produce the best accuracy. But the Socko, we'll kind of discuss that another day. But Browning did three lines in the product line, and it was a Safari grade, which this is a personal. Well, they're all personal guns here, but this one's a Safari grade 338, the gun that I've had it on horseback with a lot. It shows the wear accordingly. This one's a great shooter, actually. Most of these guns will stay under half-inch with most loads. If they give it any reasonable load, they were shooters. These were the real thing. Then they did the medallion grade, which was an upgrade in wood, had some engraving and so forth. Those are, of course, very desirable. And then, of course, they had the Olympian grade, which here's an Olympian grade 338. We'll talk about this rifle more in just a moment. And, of course, they had a coin finished receiver. with scroll engraving on the barrel and the receiver, along with game scenes, and we'll talk about this and more in just a moment. But they kind of had a rifle for everybody, so they were very popular at the time. But unfortunately, they depending on which reference you're referring to, but they started, by 59 they were underway to bring them into the country, import and begin distribute them. Most people say by 1960 they were really being imported, but by the late 60s, so literally just a decade later, the expense, and we've seen this with so many other guns, the Winchester Model 70, the Pre-64, identical. It just got too expensive to manufacture, and they couldn't compete with lower cost guns such as the Remington 700. So the expense was going like this with this gun. Even in Europe, they were struggling with the expense of machining that Mauser 98 action. It took a lot of metal to make it, and a lot of machining, a lot of man hours, and the cost was just becoming too much. So they actually did a new action on this, and it was a push feed action, pretty conventional push feed. It had a Socko style extractor, even though it was not a Socko action. Countersunk bolt face. They eliminated the large extractor, the controlled round feed. It now became a push feed action. Incidentally, those that may not know, a control round feed, let me cover that briefly. It literally strips the cartridge from the chamber, and the cartridge slips right underneath that extractor. So the bolt face literally holds that cartridge. So you have absolute control on that cartridge going in your chamber or being ejected. And so now it became a push feed, which meant that it stays in front, and it just kind of gets shoved into the chamber, and then at the last second, as the bolt's closing, the extractor pops over it. So anyway, that started in the late 60s, and they still salted, mixed in both control round and push feed actions till about 1974, 75, when they finally ended the whole product line. Sad day, because these were wonderful rifles. They were truly a classic, iconic rifle. So there you have it. There you have the Browning bolt action line of rifles, a high power rifle as they were referred to, and that was kind of a sad chapter. We're going to be doing additional videos on other classic rifles, the Remington 700, Winchester Model 77, the Ruger 77 series, Savage 110, Sockos. We'll cover them all, Weatherby Mark 5s and Vanguards as well. But we'll cover a lot of classic American rifles. But to finish this comment off, we'll talk a little bit about this rifle, which is probably the most interesting rifle on the table. This one actually came from the collection of Elmer Keith, and it was the very first Olympian 338 made. So, in fact, I'm not so sure it wasn't the very first Olympian grade made. These are rare. They're highly desirable. This one is signed by Murray Magis, M-A-G-I-S, and on the floor plate it has, of course, a standing grizzly or brown bear, if you will, with a mountainous background, along with scroll style engraving. On the trigger guard, it has a mountain lion, mouth open. On the right receiver ring, it has an elk, maybe a stag deer, being a European gun. On the rear bridge, of course, it's scroll engraved here. On the left side of the receiver ring has a moose. It has a coin finish on the receiver, kind of a French gray, if you will, but it's a coin finish. The barrel is, of course, scroll engraved. The stock is, of course, got the contrasting fore-end cap with white line spacer, ventilated recoil pad. Same thing here with the pistol grip, gold trigger, jeweled bolt. This particular one, George Honig, a very famous, world famous gunsmith that actually doesn't live very far from here, and with whom I've known a long time. He's probably most famous now for, back in the day, built a lot of just amazing custom rifles, but he also built the Honig pantograph machine. Nowadays, he's probably most famous for building the Honig round action, which is a really amazing rifle shotgun combo. But he installed the claw mounts on this for Elmer Keith. So Elmer was a big fan, as I am, of using scopes, especially on a hunting rifle, but he also valued the iron sights. And this one, this is aftermarket, of course, to his specs, but he did a sourdough style front sight with a small insert. Very, very handsome rifle, but the stocks on these are of course checkered and floral carved, so with a leaf style carving. It's actually a carving and not a cut. Well, not checkered, but a carving, a relief carve is the word I'm looking for. But these were phenomenal rifles, and they're kind of a sleeper on the market today because they're no longer in style. They're not synthetic. They're not black. They're works of art. And we generally have a new generation that looks at a gun and says, well, how many rounds will hold? Or they think, well, wood. Why isn't it black? Why isn't it camo? Why isn't it painted? So I got to get my cheap shots in there. I'm of the generation that I appreciate fine workmanship, quality arms, and these guns are absolutely quality throughout. So they're a real sleeper on the market for us old guys. So anyway, this is a piece of history right here, an Elmer Keith gun, and from his collection. I've got to mention that he received the first one, and I don't remember if the Browning told me it's late '59 or early '60 he received it, but it was right there. And I can tell you it's pictured in a lot of these books and magazines, this very gun. And he hunted both Idaho and Colorado for elk with it, took a lot of mule deer with it up on the Continental Divide between Idaho and Montana. And yet the gun, I know he carried it on a horse on at least several of those hunts, but it shows honest wear. I know he carried it in a boy scabbard, a milt spark scabbard as well that was padded. But it shows very modest wear. But again, that's one of these things that you can hunt with these guns, take care of them. You're not going to hurt them. And yet here's a very, very rare and beautiful masterpiece, if you will. So that's there you have it. And we'll try to get you some close-ups of this and some of the others. But there you have it. So we thanks for joining us, and let's just shoot a round in memory of Elmer Keith. Couple things I forgot to mention actually. Elmer Keith actually designed a stock very, very similar to this clear back in the 30s, and it's a stock that for a lot of people really reduces felt recoil, particularly when the cheek weld is correct. It actually moves the gun away from your cheek in recoil. A lot of people still very much prefer that style of stock. A couple other things. Of course, I didn't elaborate on this too much about the original Mauser versus this commercial Mauser, but the commercial version had a different shaped bolt handle, and the Browning, most people don't realize it. They look at the safety and they think, oh, it's a two-position safety, but technically it locks the bolt there. There is a third position right in the middle. It will not fire, but the bolt can open. And then, of course, in the fully forward position, it's ready to fire. And and they, of course, had a commercial trigger in them, so they're much better trigger pull. But again, that was a commercial Mauser 98. The military 98s did not have that. So this was a truly modern 98 for sportsmen. So there you have it. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Pierce Brothers.